My name is Serafina Kine, and I never believed I had the strength to destroy someone until life forced me to learn. I wasn't born cold. I wasn't born vengeful. I wasn't even brave. I was just an ordinary girl who wanted simple things: peace, honesty, safety, a world where people didn't play with your life like it was a toy they could break and toss aside. But everything I believed in shattered the year I turned 18, and once something breaks enough times, it loses its softness. It becomes sharp. It becomes dangerous, and so did I. I want to tell my story from the beginning, because revenge doesn't suddenly appear in someone's heart. It grows quietly, like a seed watered by betrayal, humiliation, fear, and helplessness. And my story starts the day Damon Warwick walked into my life and turned it upside down. The first time I met him, I didn't notice anything extraordinary. He smiled too easily, spoke too smoothly, walked like the world belonged to him. People loved him instantly, teachers, students, even the security guards at my college, and I naively believed that someone who was loved that much could never be dangerous. I was wrong. Monsters don't always hide in the dark. Sometimes they stand right under the sun where no one questions their shadows. I wish I had listened to that tiny, uncomfortable voice inside me. I wish I had paid attention to how his eyes never matched his smile. But I didn't, and because of that, he walked into my life like a storm. For a few weeks, everything seemed harmless. He would sit with me during breaks, send messages late at night, compliment my writing, my silence, even the way I tied my hair. I thought he was just being kind. I had no idea he was studying me, learning me, figuring out where my weaknesses were. I didn't realize I was being watched the way hunters watch their prey. He found out everything. What scared me, what comforted me, who I trusted, who I loved, what I dreamed about, what I feared losing, and then he used all of it against me. I don't want to describe every detail of what he did, because some memories taste like blood even years later. But I will say this: in one night, he destroyed friendships I had nurtured for years. He twisted my messages, forged screenshots, spread lies I couldn't defend myself against. He humiliated me publicly, and when I tried to confront him, he looked straight at me with a smile. Like hurting me was entertainment for him, but ruining my reputation wasn't enough for him. Monsters like Damon don't stop when you break. They only stop when you shatter. He dragged my family into it, threatened my younger brother, exposed private things from my home, and made our lives collapse in ways I didn't know were possible. When I came home that night and saw my mother crying and the house in chaos, something inside me died, something that would never come back. I remember standing near the broken photo frames, listening to my parents' voices tremble as they tried to make sense of something I knew was my fault. I remember staring at myself in the mirror and not recognizing the girl who looked back. Her red eyes, her trembling hands, her silent, swallowed screams. That was the first night I tasted what helplessness really feels like. It's cold, it's suffocating, it sits in your throat like ice and fills your lungs with something you can't breathe out. But something else was born inside me that night, quiet, steady, terrifying, not rage, not hatred, just clarity. If someone has the power to ruin your life so easily, then you must learn how to ruin theirs too. And that was the beginning. The next morning, I didn't cry. For the first time in weeks, my mind wasn't foggy. It was crystal clear. I looked around my destroyed living room, stepped over broken pieces of my old life, and realized I had two choices: live the rest of my life as Damon's victim, or take everything from him the way he took everything from me. So I made my choice. I didn't announce it. I didn't shout it. Revenge isn't loud. It grows slowly, quietly, patiently. The first thing I learned was silence, real, powerful silence. I disappeared emotionally. I let people believe I was broken. I deleted every account, blocked every friend, erased every trace of the girl Damon had known. I didn't even speak unless I had to. I was rebuilding myself in the shadows where no one could interfere. And then, step by step, I walked into his world, not as Serafina the victim, but as someone he would never expect to fight back. I observed him for weeks, his patterns, his habits, his lies, his insecurities. I listened to the people around him, learned who he trusted, who he feared, who he manipulated the most. I became invisible to him, which made me dangerous. He was used to people reacting, crying, begging, explaining, defending. I did none of that. I smiled when he walked past me. I ignored his presence like it meant nothing, and that's when he first got confused. Monsters lose power when their victim stops being afraid. But mine didn't stop being afraid. I just started hiding it until I could weaponize it. I didn't attack his reputation the way he attacked mine. That would have been too simple, too predictable. Instead, I attacked the things he valued more: his friends, his confidence, his credibility, his control. And I started with something small, a whisper, a perfectly calculated comment placed in the right conversation at the right time. People believe rumors not because they are true, but because they are interesting. And Damon had lived so long as the golden boy that people didn't hesitate to believe something darker underneath. Within a week, I watched him unravel just a little bit. He didn't know what was happening, and confusion is the first weakness of people who think they're invincible. But I was nowhere near done. Revenge is never complete with one hit. It must be slow, precise, layered. I wanted him to lose everything gradually the way I had. I wanted him to wake up every day wondering which part of his life would collapse next. I wanted him to feel that same cold panic in his chest, that same helplessness in his throat, that same shaking uncertainty I had lived with for months. I wanted him to finally understand what he had made me become. And I was just getting started. When I think back to the days that followed my decision to destroy Damon Warwick, I realize something unexpected happened to me. A strange calmness settled inside my bones. It wasn't peace, because peace is warm, and nothing about me was warm anymore. It was more like the quiet before a storm, the kind of silence that doesn't soothe but warns. I moved through the world differently, like a shadow that had learned to live without needing sunlight. People around me noticed the change, of course. They whispered about it in hallways and staircases and outside classrooms when they thought I wasn't listening. They said I had gone cold. They said there was something distant in my eyes. They said I was no longer the same girl I used to be. They were right. Something had shifted inside me forever. And the funny thing is, they had no idea that the change was not a reaction to Damon anymore. It was preparation. Every morning I woke with one question in my mind: what will be the next piece of him I take? But revenge cannot be rushed. It is like sculpting. You carve a little at a time, trusting the shape will reveal itself eventually. So the first thing I had to do was study him more deeply than anyone ever had. I learned what made him angry, what made him insecure, who he pretended to care about, who he genuinely feared, what he wanted people to think he was, and what he truly was underneath the mask. Damon valued control more than anything. He needed to feel like everyone around him was beneath him, orbiting him, worshipping him. His power came from attention. Good or bad, it didn't matter as long as eyes were on him. I knew that if I wanted to break him, I had to take away the one thing he could not survive without: his influence. So I started with his closest circle, the friends who adored him blindly, people who would defend him even if he burned the world down, people who believed he could do no wrong. I needed them to question him, then doubt him, and eventually abandon him. The easiest way to shatter a powerful person is to isolate them. That was my plan. There were 3 pillars in his circle: Mason, Alia, and Rowan. They were inseparable, loud, arrogant, and loyal to Damon like worshippers loyal to a false god. And I knew if even one of them turned against him, the cracks would spread like fire. Rowan was the first target because he had the most fragile ego. He loved trying to look smarter than he was, loved pretending he knew things before anyone else. So I fed him tiny crumbs of information, subtle hints, and carefully placed suspicions. Nothing obvious, nothing that could be traced back to me, just little secrets disguised as accidents, a sly comment here, a casual remark there, a pointed look at the right time, a planted misunderstanding at the perfect moment. And slowly, Rowan began noticing the things Damon actually did, the manipulation, the hypocrisy, the lies. He began thinking these thoughts were his own, though they had been planted by me one by one. People believe what they want to believe, and Rowan had long wanted to prove he wasn't Damon's shadow. It took 2 weeks before the first real crack formed. I saw it happen in the courtyard on a Thursday afternoon. Damon made a joke about Rowan's grades, something he had done 1,000 times before. But this time, Rowan didn't laugh. He stiffened. He looked away. He walked off without saying a word, and Damon blinked like he couldn't understand what was happening. Good, confusion was step 1. Humiliation would come later. Next was Alia. She was harder because she adored Damon in a way that felt obsessive. They had a strange connection. He used her admiration to feed his ego, and she used his attention to feel special. But even the strongest bonds have fault lines if you look closely enough, and I knew hers. Alia had always been insecure about her appearance. She pretended otherwise: loud makeup, loud clothes, loud voice. But inside, she was terrified of being overlooked. All I had to do was introduce a tiny doubt in her mind, something delicate, something poisonous. I didn't need to lie. I just needed to let her see the truth she had ignored, a misplaced compliment here and there, a subtle comparison between her and another girl, a hint that Damon had said something unflattering about her, a question asked innocently but timed sharply. That was all it took. Alia started watching Damon more closely, watching the way he flirted with other girls, watching how he dismissed her feelings, watching how he used her affection like a tool. Doubt settled into her heart like a splinter, and once it was in, it only grew. The tension between them became visible within days. Irritation, snapping remarks, silent jealousy. Damon didn't understand it, and there is nothing more dangerous for a narcissist than losing control over a worshipper. That left Mason, the loyal one, the strong one, the hardest one to break. His only weakness was loyalty itself. I didn't have to attack him. I only had to show him that Damon didn't deserve the loyalty he gave him. And Damon made that easier than I expected. One afternoon, I overheard Damon mocking Mason behind his back to a group of boys, calling him useful but dumb. I didn't have to twist the truth. I just had to deliver it into the right hands. 2 days later, Mason confronted him loudly in front of half the college. Damon brushed it off, laughed about it, pretended it wasn't serious. That was his mistake. Mason walked away from him that day, and friendships like theirs don't repair easily when betrayal is involved. And just like that, the kingdom Damon had built on arrogance began to crumble. But this was not enough for me, not even close. Breaking his friendships was only the foundation. I needed to go deeper. I needed to dismantle the version of himself he believed in. I needed him to feel the same suffocation he had forced me to live with, and that meant attacking the one thing he never doubted, his confidence. The cracks showed slowly. He became irritated more often. He snapped at people. His smiles became forced, his jokes dull. He wasn't used to losing control of the narrative, and when a manipulator loses control, they become dangerous, but also sloppy. And sloppy people destroy themselves with a little push. One evening, I watched him in the cafeteria from across the room. He sat alone for the first time in months, his friends scattered, his attention fractured, his charm useless. He looked lost, and seeing that gave me a feeling I cannot fully explain. Not joy, not satisfaction, something colder, something sharper. For the first time, he was feeling life without power. For the first time, he wasn't untouchable. For the first time, he didn't look like a monster. He looked human, and humans are easier to break, but even then I wasn't done, not even close. Because revenge is never complete until the person who destroyed you realizes exactly who you have become because of them. And I had just begun showing him. I woke up before dawn, the sky still ink black as if mourning everything I had lost. My hands trembled, not out of fear anymore, but because of the weight of what I was about to do. I wasn't the same Sarah who once believed people could be trusted. I wasn't the girl who cried quietly in the dark, waiting for someone to understand. I had changed into something sharper, colder, and far more dangerous. I had turned myself into the storm my enemies never expected, but absolutely deserved. The plan had been growing inside me like fire, collecting oxygen with every memory of betrayal, every lie they told me, every time they pushed me closer to the edge. Today wasn't just revenge, it was justice, my justice. I left my apartment silently, the corridor stretching like a tunnel behind me. The security guard didn't lift his head. I had arranged everything beforehand. I had learned that people don't pay attention to those who move with purpose. They assume purpose means permission. My footsteps echoed as I approached the car waiting outside. A familiar voice whispered through the cold air, "You're really doing it today." I didn't need to look to recognize Daniel's voice, steady, low, and dangerously calm, like a knife wrapped in velvet. He wasn't with me out of loyalty. He owed me. I saved him once when nobody else did, and he repaid debts with fierce devotion. "Yes," I said, "no more waiting, no more planning. Today ends everything." He opened the car door for me. "Let's finish it." As we drove, the streets were empty, washed pale by streetlights. I rested my head against the window, watching buildings blur past. My heart beat with that slow, frightening steadiness that comes before a storm breaks. I had imagined this moment 1,000 times. I thought it would feel angry, violent, consuming, but it didn't. It felt quiet, like standing before a grave you knew you'd eventually dig. My enemies didn't just hurt me. They tried to erase me, my truth, my voice, my life, but they failed, and failure has consequences. The first stop was a warehouse on the edge of the city, the place where everything began, the place where they broke me, the place where I decided I would one day break them back. When I stepped inside, memories hit me like cold water, the smell of metal, the thick silence, the faint echo of a girl I once was, begging, pleading, believing that mercy was an option. But today, mercy was dead. I buried it myself. "They'll come soon," Daniel said, checking the time. "They'll come because they always think I'm weak," I replied. "They think showing up alone makes me powerless. They think that because they don't understand what being broken does to a woman like me. They don't understand that when you push someone to the edge, you should pray they never learn how to fly." Minutes later, the metal door groaned open. First came Saad, calculated, smirking, wearing the same arrogance that once convinced him he'd get away with everything. Behind him were Rohan and Faraz, shadows following their master, the exact same trio who tried to bury my truth. But they didn't expect to find me standing tall, eyes steady, wearing a smile that wasn't happiness. It was a warning. "Well, well," Saad said, clapping slowly. "The girl returns to the place she should have stayed quiet in." I stepped toward him. "And you return to the place where you should start praying." His smirk faltered only slightly. "You came alone?" he asked. "No." I said. "I came with the truth you tried to kill." At my signal, the lights flickered on, bright, sharp, white. And there, projected across the wall, were the recordings, the proof, every word they said, every threat, every confession they didn't know I had captured when they thought I was too afraid to think. Their faces drained of color. "Where did you?" Rohan stuttered. "You should have checked my pockets that night." I said. "Fear makes people careless, but not me. Not anymore." Saad lunged forward, rage distorting his face, but Daniel moved faster, stepping between us like a wall made of iron. "You lay a hand on her," Daniel said coldly, "and you won't be able to use your hands again." Saad froze, not because he feared Daniel, but because he finally feared me. "You think this will ruin us," he hissed. "No," I replied, "I know it will." I pulled out my phone, hit a single button, and every file, videos, audio, screenshots, sent automatically to multiple journalists, lawyers, police contacts, activists, and even their own business partners. A synchronized storm. The real kind of revenge isn't loud. It's permanent, you. Faraz whispered, collapsing to his knees. "You've destroyed everything." "No," I said softly. I've freed myself. Saad's face twisted with hatred. You think you've won. This isn't over. I walked up to him until I stood inches away. I looked directly into the eyes of the man who tried to break me. No, Saad, I whispered. It ended the moment I stopped being afraid of you. He swung his fist at me, wild with desperation. But I didn't flinch. Daniel intercepted him, slamming him against the wall. Rohan tried to run, but I had locked the door from the inside. Feroz tried to beg for forgiveness, but I had none left to give. Let them go, I told Daniel finally. Their lives are already over. When the police sirens echoed outside minutes later, Saad looked at me one last time. Anger, fear, disbelief all tangled in his eyes. You set us up, he muttered weakly. No, I said. You set yourselves on fire. I just handed you the match. As they were dragged away, screaming, cursing, breaking apart, I felt nothing but calm, deep, powerful calm. The kind that comes when justice is no longer a wish but a reality. Daniel stood next to me silently. It's done, he said. I nodded. Yes, it's finally done. We stepped out of the warehouse just as the first light of sunrise touched the sky, soft, golden, warm. The kind of light I hadn't felt in years. For the first time I breathed without pain. For the first time I felt alive. And for the first time I wasn't afraid of the world anymore, because I knew something they never understood. A woman who survives fire doesn't fear ashes. She rises from them, and I did, stronger, wiser, unbreakable. My revenge wasn't the end of me, it was the beginning.